Right, let's talk about sales. That glorious, soul-sucking, occasionally brilliant, and fundamentally human activity that has been with us since the dawn of time. Before currency, before writing, before we'd even figured out that eating certain red berries was a one-way ticket to the spectral plane, there was sales. Picture this, a bored caveman, let's call him Grog, sitting on a rock. He's got another rock, but this one is shiny. He doesn't know why it's shiny. He doesn't know what it does. But he knows, deep in his proto-hominid soul, that his neighbor, Thag, who only has dull, non-shiny rocks, will absolutely want this one. This, right here, is the birth of perceived value, the cornerstone of all commerce. It's the original, this will change your life. No, I can't explain how. Just give me your best mammoth pelt. So Grog ambles over to Thag's cave, shiny rock in hand, ready to close the deal. He doesn't have a script. He doesn't have a CRM. He has a rock, and a deeply ingrained instinct for opportunism. He points at the rock. He makes a grunting sound that vaguely translates to ooh, sparkly. Then he points at Thag's very warm, very useful mammoth pelt. The negotiation is brutal. It involves a lot of pointing, some threatening gestures with a club, and a final reluctant exchange. Thag gets a useless but aesthetically pleasing piece of geology, and Grog gets to not freeze to death. It's a win-win if you define winning as one person getting something they vaguely want, and the other getting something they desperately need. This is the bedrock of sales creating desire for something fundamentally unnecessary. This primitive transaction set in motion a chain of events that would lead directly to a man in a polyester suit trying to sell you an extended warranty for your toaster. The core principles were established right there in the dirt. First, identify a prospect who has something you want. Second, present them with an item of questionable utility but high novelty. Third, leverage social pressure, fear of missing out, and perhaps the subtle threat of violence. It's a playbook that has remained remarkably consistent for 40,000 years. The tools have changed, sure. We've swapped clubs for contracts and grunts for jargon-filled emails, but the essence is the same. It's about convincing someone that your shiny rock is worth more than their mammoth pelt. And let's be clear, Grog didn't stop there. The moment he realized he could trade one shiny rock, he immediately started looking for more. He became the world's first sales professional, a pioneer of prospecting. He probably even developed a primitive form of lead generation, which largely consisted of seeing who had the nicest cave paintings, and thus the most disposable pelts. He was a quota crusher, a top performer. He probably got a bigger cave as a bonus. And somewhere in another cave, a primitive manager was born, a bigger caveman named Ugg, who took a cut of Grog's pelts for the privilege of letting him hunt for rocks on his patch of tundra. And thus, the sales hierarchy was born. It's been a disaster for humanity ever since. Fast forward a few millennia, and humanity has decided to get organized. We've built pyramids, we've invented philosophy, and most importantly, we've invented money, which is just a more efficient, government-approved, shiny rock. Welcome to the ancient world, where sales gets an upgrade. In Egypt, Greece, and China, the marketplace became the chaotic, beating heart of civilization. This is where sales evolved from a one-on-one shakedown into a full-blown spectator sport. You had merchants shouting, haggling, and deploying psychological tactics that would make a modern-day NLP practitioner blush. They were the original A/B testers, trying out different opening lines on passers-by to see what would stick. My friend for you, special price, was probably first uttered by a man selling slightly off-brand papyrus. The invention of coinage was a game-changer. Suddenly, you didn't have to drag a goat to the market to trade for a new pair of sandals. You could use these little metal discs, which made transactions faster, more abstract, and infinitely more scalable. This also led to the invention of credit, debt, and the first ever sales commission. The Chinese, being frighteningly ahead of their time, were probably using abacuses to calculate their sales funnels and inventing the concept of quarterly targets sometime around the Han Dynasty. They also gave us the art of the subtle upsell. You came for rice, but you left with rice, a jar of fermented bean paste you didn't need, and a vague sense of having been masterfully played. It's the ancient equivalent of Amazon's customers who bought this also bought. And with organized commerce came organized scams. The Greeks, between inventing democracy and tragic theater, also perfected the art of the bait and switch. A merchant would display a magnificent amphora, a true work of art, but the one he'd wrap up for you would be a slightly wonky one from the back of the stall, made by his apprentice who was still figuring out how to make a straight line. They also invented the receipt, which wasn't so much for customer service as it was for proof of purchase, so you couldn't come back and claim you'd been shortchanged. It was the world's first legally binding no backsies. This is progress, people. Sales is just lying, but legally, and now we have a paper trail to prove it. The Romans, of course, took all of this and industrialized it. They built incredible roads, not just for their legions, but for their traveling salesmen. These guys were selling everything from Gallic pottery to exotic spices from the East, all with the full backing of the Roman Empire's logistical might. They had standardized weights and measures, which in theory was great, but in practice just meant they had to be more creative with their scams. A thumb on the scales became a classic for a reason. They were selling the dream of a sophisticated, interconnected world, one overpriced bottle of olive oil at a time. They were the first multinational sales force, and their territory was the entire known world. Their motto? Veni, vidi, vendi. I came, I saw, I sold. After the glorious, organized grift of the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe entered the Middle Ages, a period which history remembers for plagues, feudalism, and a truly spectacular decline in personal hygiene. But did sales die? Of course not. It just got weird and religious. With society fragmented and literacy at an all-time low, the market for tangible goods shrank, but the market for intangible hope exploded. And who better to fill that gap than the church and a legion of freelance hucksters selling salvation, miracles, and a bewildering array of holy relics? This was the golden age of selling things that were not only useless, but also very likely fake. It was faith-based selling at its most literal. Enter the pardoner, the medieval era's ultimate sales rep. These characters, immortalized by Chaucer, roamed the countryside with a license from the Pope, or so they claimed, to sell indulgences. These were basically get-out-of-hell-free cards. For a few coins, your deceased Aunt Mildred, who may have had a bit of a temper and a fondness for her neighbor's husband, could get her sentence in purgatory reduced. It was a genius business model. The product cost nothing to produce, the target market included literally everyone, and the return on investment was infinite and, crucially, unprovable until after you were dead. It's the ultimate SaaS subscription. Pay now. Receive benefits in the afterlife. Customer support is non-existent. And then there were the relics. Oh, the glorious, farcical world of religious relics. Salesmen, often monks or other men of the cloth, would travel from village to village with chests full of treasures. They had splinters from the true cross. So many splinters, in fact, that you could have built a fleet of ships. They had the bones of saints, the breath of Christ in a bottle, and vials of the Virgin Mary's milk. One salesman in a German town was famously trying to sell feathers from the Archangel Gabriel. It was a marketplace of morbid and absurd curiosities, where the value proposition wasn't just about owning something rare, it was about buying a direct line to the divine. And if you questioned the authenticity of a pig's bone being passed off as the finger of John the Baptist, well, that sounded a lot like heresy, friend. Alongside these holy rollers were the snake oil salesmen, the ancestors of every wellness influencer on Instagram today. These were the chaps who would roll into town with a cart, put on a show, and sell a miraculous elixir that could cure everything from gout and baldness to a sour disposition. The elixir was usually a potent combination of alcohol, opium, and whatever herbs they could find by the side of the road. It didn't cure anything, of course, but it would certainly make you forget you were sick for a few hours. This was the birth of solution selling, identifying a customer's pain point, in this case, literally pain, and selling them a temporary and often dangerous fix. They sold hope in a bottle, and business was booming. And then came steam, and coal, and factories. The Industrial Revolution arrived like a soot-stained, cacophonous freight train, and it changed sales forever. Suddenly, we weren't just selling one handcrafted pot or one dubious holy relic at a time. We were mass-producing goods. Millions of identical, slightly shoddy, factory-made items were flooding the market, and all of it needed to be sold. This created a new kind of pressure. For the first time in history, the problem wasn't a lack of supply. It was a surplus. The challenge was no longer finding a product for a customer, but finding a customer for a product you had 10,000 of, sitting in a warehouse in Manchester. This demand for demand gave rise to a new breed of salesman, the aggressive, fast-talking, over-caffeinated urban peddler. These were the men who stood on street corners, in noisy, crowded city markets, shouting about the wonders of factory-made soap. iron stoves, and patent medicines that were even more dubious than their medieval counterparts. Their sales technique was simple volume, both in the number of products they moved and the sheer decibel level of their pitch. They had to be louder than the clatter of the horse-drawn trams, louder than the factory whistles, and louder than the 10 other salesmen on the same street selling the exact same thing. It was a relentless, exhausting, and deeply annoying form of commerce. This era also saw the birth of branding and advertising as we know it. With so many similar products on the market, companies needed a way to differentiate their miracle soap from the other guy's miracle soap. So they gave them names, they put them in fancy packaging, and they printed posters with wild, unsubstantiated claims, plastering them on every available wall. Pear's soap, a balm for the skin, Dr. Kilmer's swamp root kidney, Cure the great healer. These weren't just products, they were promises. They were selling not just soap, but the idea of cleanliness and social status. Not just a bottle of brown liquid, but the hope of health in a world riddled with disease. It was the beginning of selling the sizzle, not the steak. The traveling salesman also became a legendary figure, a professional road warrior armed with a catalog and a sample case. These men crisscrossed the country by train, bringing the wonders of the industrial age to every small town and isolated farmhouse. They were charming, persistent, and often the only source of news and gossip from the outside world. They sold everything from sewing machines and encyclopedias to agricultural equipment. They mastered the art of getting a foot in the door, overcoming objections, and closing a deal over a cup of tea in a lonely farmer's kitchen. They were the pioneers of relationship selling, even if that relationship was based on a carefully constructed persona and a desperate need to hit their quarterly numbers. Welcome to the mid-20th century. The world has survived 2 global wars and is now drowning in post-war prosperity and paranoia. The factories that once churned out tanks are now making toasters, televisions, and automobiles with absurd tail fins. And selling all this stuff, it became a science, an art form, a religion. This is the Mad Men era, the golden age of advertising and the glorification of the salesman as a slick, sophisticated hero of capitalism. Armed with a crisp suit, a firm handshake, and a liver conditioned by straight bourbon, the salesman was king. He wasn't just selling a product. He was selling the American dream, one commission at a time. The tactics became more psychological, more refined. Advertising agencies on Madison Avenue spent millions researching how to tap into the suburban psyche. They weren't selling a car. They were selling freedom, status, and masculinity. They weren't selling a refrigerator. They were selling domestic bliss and the envy of the neighbors. The target? Often the tired housewife, who was told this new vacuum cleaner or that new brand of floor wax was the key to a happier marriage. It was a masterclass in creating insecurities and then selling the cure. All broadcast in glorious black and white between episodes of. Sales had officially weaponized aspiration. Then there was the cold call. Oh, the humanity. With the widespread adoption of the telephone, sales departments had a brilliant, terrible idea. Why wait for customers when we can interrupt their dinner and bother them in their own homes? This gave birth to the telemarketer and an entire industry based on unwanted intrusion. It was a numbers game. Make 100 calls, get 99 hang-ups in one maybe. It was soul-crushing for the caller and infuriating for the called. It was also effective enough to stick around. Cold calls, because emotional trauma builds pipelines. This era also perfected the art of door-to-door sales. Armies of Fuller Brush men, Avon ladies, and encyclopedia salesmen fanned out across the suburbs, ringing doorbells and deploying rehearsed scripts. They were masters of rapport building, overcoming objections, and creating urgency. This special offer is only available today, Mrs. Johnson. They were figures of admiration and, well, slight pity, embodying relentless optimism and quiet desperation of the hustle. And let's not forget their high-tech tools. The Rolodex for managing contacts and the mighty fax machine for sending signed contracts. It was the peak of analog sales, a world of paper, persistence, and 3 martini lunches that were definitely about building client relationships. Then, the world plugged in. The gentle hum of the fax machine was replaced by the screeching dial-up modem, a sound that will forever be etched into the brains of millennials as the mating call of the early internet. Welcome to the 1990s and the dot-com boom, a period of wild, irrational exuberance where sales got a digital makeover and promptly lost its mind. Suddenly, anyone with a GeoCities page and a product to sell, be it Beanie Babies, pet food, or shares in a company with no revenue and a name like Pets.com, was a global entrepreneur. The barriers to entry collapsed, and the internet became the world's biggest, most chaotic, and most poorly designed marketplace. The first and most glorious innovation of this era was spam. Email was a miracle, a way to communicate instantly, for free, with anyone in the world. Sales departments took one look at this incredible tool and collectively decided to ruin it for everyone. They bought lists of millions of email addresses and unleashed a digital tsunami of unsolicited offers. Make money fast. Nigerian prince needs your help. Viagra. Our inboxes became a war zone. This was cold calling on steroids, a method that was even more impersonal, even more annoying, and, thanks to the magic of the send button, infinitely scalable. It was the sales equivalent of just screaming into the void and hoping someone screamed back with their credit card number. Alongside spam came its equally obnoxious cousin, the pop-up ad. You'd be trying to read an article about the new Star Wars prequel, and suddenly your screen would be hijacked by a flurry of windows, flashing and blinking, promising you a lower mortgage rate or informing you that you were the 1 millionth visitor to the site and had won a free iPod. Closing them was a game of digital whack-a-mole. Close one and 3 more would appear. It was the most aggressive, in-your-face form of advertising ever conceived, a desperate, flailing attempt to capture eyeballs in an increasingly crowded digital space. It was the online equivalent of a salesman grabbing you by the lapels and screaming about a limited-time offer. And then, there was e-commerce itself. The early days of buying things online were an exercise in blind faith. You'd type your credit card details into a sketchy-looking form on a website that seemed to be designed by a colorblind hamster, and then you'd just hope. You'd hope the website was real. You'd hope your credit card information wasn't being sold to a hacker in Estonia. And you'd hope that the thing you ordered would actually show up, and that it would vaguely resemble the pixelated JPEG image you saw online. It was a chaotic, unregulated Wild West. And yet, we did it. We bought the books from Amazon, the DVDs from Netflix, and the Pez dispensers from eBay. The shiny rock was now digital, and we wanted it just as badly. And so we arrive at the modern era. The dust from the dot-com bomb has settled, and sales has put on a new, slightly more respectable suit, a suit made of data. Welcome to the age of SaaS, software as a service, where you don't buy a product anymore, you subscribe to it. You are no longer a customer, you are a user, a source of monthly recurring revenue. The salesman is no longer a slick road warrior. He is a sales development representative or an account executive, armed not with a sample case, but with a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account and a headset. The goal is no longer a one-time close. It's to lock you into a never-ending cycle of upgrades, renewals, and tiered pricing plans. The beating, black heart of this new sales world is the CRM, the Customer Relationship Management Tool. Platforms like Salesforce are the new cathedrals of commerce. They are vast, complex databases where every single interaction with a potential customer is logged, tracked, and analyzed. Every email sent, every call made, every link clicked. It's all in the CRM. For the sales manager, it's a dream of total oversight and accountability. For the salesperson, it's a nightmare of endless data entry, a digital panopticon that turns the art of the deal into a joyless exercise in updating fields and moving opportunities through a pipeline. It's less death of a salesman and more slow, agonizing death by 1,000 drop-down menus. The language of sales has also become a parody of itself. Nobody just sells anything anymore. They drive value, create synergy, leverage pain points, and ideate solutions. They engage in consultative selling and challenger sales. A cold call is now a touchpoint in a cadence. It's a corporate dialect designed to obscure the simple, brutal reality of what's happening. Someone is trying to get someone else to give them money. This jargon is a defense mechanism, a way to make the relentless grind of hitting quota feel more strategic and important than it actually is. It's the linguistic equivalent of putting lipstick on a pig, a very persistent KPI-obsessed pig, and at the center of it all is the hustle culture broadcast for all to see on LinkedIn. The platform has become a theater of sales success, a relentless feed of people humbled and honored to announce they've crushed their quarter, sharing game-changing tips about cold emailing and posting motivational quotes over pictures of lions. It's a performative grind, where vulnerability is a brand, and every setback is a learning opportunity. Just got off a 7 a.m. call with a prospect in Australia, and now hopping on a 9 p.m. with a client in LA. Hashtag rise and grind, hashtag sales life, hashtag never not closing. It's exhausting just to read, let alone live. This is the new face of sales, a 24/7 performance of relentless, optimized, and publicly declared ambition. Just when you thought the sales grind couldn't get any more dystopian, along comes AI. Artificial intelligence is the new shiny rock, and every tech company is scrambling to sell it, use it, and rebrand their entire existence around it. For sales, this is a paradigm shift of seismic proportions. We now have AI tools that can write your sales emails, analyze your recorded calls for sentiment, predict which leads are most likely to close, and even generate a script for you in real time. The dream, or perhaps the nightmare, is the fully automated sales cycle, a world where human interaction is just a bottleneck to be engineered away. We're on the verge of replacing the guy in the polyester suit with a line of code. This has given birth to a new archetype, the AI sales bro. You'll find him on LinkedIn, of course. He's the guy who has replaced his headshot with a slick, AI-generated avatar. His posts are no longer just about hustle. They're about 10xing your outreach with this one weird ChatGPT prompt. He talks about autonomous agents and hyper-personalization at scale. He's not just a salesman, he's a tech evangelist, a futurist, selling the dream of a frictionless, automated pipeline. He is selling the idea that you can remove the messy, unpredictable human element from the process of selling to other messy, unpredictable humans. It's a beautiful, terrifying, and probably doomed idea. For the customer, this means a new level of sophisticated manipulation. The generic spam email is being replaced by a hyper-personalized one that references your job, your company's recent news, and maybe even that comment you left on a niche subreddit 3 years ago. The ads that follow you around the internet are becoming eerily prescient, seemingly knowing what you want before you do. The sales process is becoming less of a conversation and more of a perfectly optimized, algorithmically driven journey designed to lead you to exactly one destination: the checkout page. The uncanny valley is no longer just for robots. It's for the entire customer experience. Is that a helpful recommendation? Or has a machine just successfully read my mind? And yet, for all this technological wizardry, the fundamental absurdity remains. We now have armies of highly paid engineers and data scientists working around the clock to build complex AI models that can do one thing: replicate the patter of a 19th century traveling salesman. We are spending billions of dollars to teach a machine how to get its digital foot in the door, how to overcome objections, and how to create a false sense of urgency. We've managed to automate everything except the core anxiety of the transaction. The fundamental truth is unchanged. One entity is still trying to convince another entity to part with its resources. We've just added a layer of silicon and a whole lot of venture capital. So after this chaotic journey through time, from shiny rocks to sentient algorithms, what have we learned? We've learned that the tools change, the jargon evolves, and the suits get marginally better. But the game remains the same. The history of sales isn't just a history of commerce. It's the history of persuasion itself. It's the story of how we convince each other and ourselves of value. And once you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. The grand cosmic joke is that everyone is in sales. You, me, everyone. We are all always selling something. It's the one universal human condition that no one likes to admit. Think about it. What is a job interview if not a sales pitch? The product is you. Your CV is the brochure. Your suit is the packaging. And your rehearsed answers to "What's your biggest weakness?" are the carefully crafted sales script. You're selling your skills, your experience, and your carefully curated personality to a hiring manager who is, in turn, selling you on the company culture and the dubious promise of room for growth. What is a first date, if not a sales meeting? You're selling a vision of a future relationship, highlighting your best features, sense of humor, kindness, and downplaying the bugs, like your weird obsession with collecting vintage salt shakers. Even a baby is a master salesman. It can't talk, it can't walk, it can't even use a CRM, but it can sell. It sells the promise of love, legacy, and genetic immortality. It closes the deal with a gurgle and a smile. The price? Only about 2 decades of your freedom, finances, and sanity. It is the single most effective and most ruthless sales pitch in the natural world. Politicians sell promises of a better future for your vote. Artists sell their perspective for your attention. Every social media post is a sale, selling an idealized version of our lives for a little hit of dopamine in the form of a like. We are all grog, holding up our shiny rocks, hoping someone will trade us their mammoth pelt. And that's the beautiful, terrible, and hilarious truth. Sales is not some grubby corner of the business world. It is the world. It's the engine of human interaction, the lubricant of society, the force that turns ideas into reality. It's lying and it's truth. It's manipulation and it's connection. It's the reason we have pyramids and pop-up ads, cathedrals and CRMs. It's the relentless, chaotic, and deeply human hustle for something more. So the next time a salesperson tries to sell you something you don't need, don't be too hard on them. They're just participating in the oldest, most enduring, and most absurd ritual we've ever invented. Sales never died. It just learned how to sell you dreams.